In the very heart of the Amazon rainforest lies a mystery so dark, so forbidden, that even the most detailed maps refuse to mark its place. For centuries, explorers and adventurers whispered about it in hushed tones. They spoke of a colony that vanished without a trace, hundreds of settlers swallowed whole by the jungle. Some called it the City of the Dead. Others gave it an even more terrifying name, the Gate to Hell. The story begins in the early 1600s when a band of Europeans pushed deeper and deeper into the wilderness, searching for gold, for glory, for a new paradise. What they found seemed, at first, like heaven on earth. The soil was rich, the river sparkled, and the forest sang at night with strange and beautiful sounds. But the deeper they stayed, the darker the forest became. Because this paradise had a secret, a hunger, and soon the jungle itself would reveal
the promise of paradise. The year was the early 1600s, a time when the world was still half unknown, and men were willing to gamble their lives for a chance at fortune and immortality. A group of European settlers, armed with little more than their faith and their greed, marched into the heart of the Amazon. They believed they were destined to discover El Dorado, the legendary city of gold whispered about in taverns and royal courts. With every step deeper into the endless green, they imagined themselves heroes who would return with riches beyond measure. At first, their gambles seemed to pay off. They carved out a small settlement on the banks of a glimmering river. The soil was so fertile that crops grew almost overnight. Fresh water shimmered in streams that cut through the forest like veins of crystal. Exotic fruits hung heavy from the trees, so sweet and strange they seemed almost otherworldly. By day, the sun bathed the village in golden light. By night, the air was alive with the music of unseen creatures, frogs, birds, and insects weaving a symphony that no European ear had ever heard before. To the settlers, it felt like paradise had opened its gates just for them. They built homes of wood and stone. They raised families. They laughed around fires, believing they had conquered the wild. For the first time in weeks, they felt safe. But beneath the canopy, the forest watched, silent, patient. Every vine, every shadow, every rustling leaf seemed to lean closer, as if the jungle itself was listening. What the settlers did not yet realize was that paradise.
At first, the settlers ignored the strange signs. A missing hunter here, a late return there. After all, this was the jungle, dangerous, wild, unforgiving. They told themselves it was nothing more than accidents. But soon, the accidents became patterns. One night, a man left to hunt boar and never returned. The next morning, his bow was found lying in the mud, snapped in half. But there was no blood, no tracks, no struggle. It was as if he had simply dissolved into the forest. Days later, 2 children vanished while playing near the riverbank. Their toys were discovered neatly placed on the grass, as though someone, or something, had taken them by the hand and led them away. The settlers grew uneasy, but unease turned to terror when the fires began. Without warning, flames would erupt in the dead of night. Roofs collapsed, crops burned to ash. Yet when survivors searched for the cause, there were no torches, no sparks, no traces of human hands. It was as if the jungle itself had ignited in rage.
Every morning, more were found. Men and women lying in their beds, their eyes wide open, glassy with horror, their mouths twisted in silent screams, as though they had seen something so terrible, so inhuman, that their hearts simply stopped. No wounds, no marks, just the look of pure, frozen terror. The survivors began to whisper among themselves. They spoke of voices drifting through the trees at night, not voices they recognized, not Portuguese, not Spanish, not Latin. These whispers spoke in a language no human tongue should know. The words slithered into their ears like venom, too strange to understand, but impossible to ignore. At first, they thought it was madness, but then the voices started calling their names. One by one, settlers confessed to hearing their dead relatives, their lost children, even their lovers calling to them from the jungle. Some resisted, others gave in. They followed the voices into the dark and never returned. And while the people of the colony fought to cling to sanity, something else was happening. The jungle began to change. The trees seemed closer every morning, their roots twisting through houses, their branches blocking the sun. Vines crept across doors and windows, as though the forest itself was reaching inside, pulling the colony back into its green, suffocating embrace. What once felt like paradise now felt...
Years passed before another expedition dared to enter that part of the Amazon. By then, rumors of the cursed colony had already spread across Europe. Some believed the settlers had found unimaginable riches and fled to start a secret kingdom. Others whispered that the jungle had eaten them alive. But nothing could have prepared the new explorers for what they found. When they arrived, the village was silent, too silent. No laughter, no children, not even the sound of farm animals. Only the endless hum of insects and the rustle of leaves above. The settlement still stood, but it was wrong. Wooden houses leaned and sagged, rotting as though decades had passed in mere years. Yet on the tables, meals were laid out. Bowls of fruit, bread half-eaten, cups of water still filled. Tools were scattered in the fields, left in the middle of labor, as the workers had dropped them and vanished into thin air. The explorers searched for bodies, graves, bones, anything. But there was nothing, not a single human corpse. Hundreds of settlers had simply disappeared, leaving behind their world like a photograph frozen in time. Some members of the expedition swore they saw movement in the trees, shadows dart.
Others claimed they heard faint laughter, children's voices carried by the wind echoing from the empty houses. One man insisted he felt small hands tugging at his coat, though when he spun around, no one was there. Panic set in. The newcomers wanted to flee, but the deeper they investigated, the stranger it became. Carvings appeared on the walls of the houses, symbols no one recognized, twisting lines and spirals that seemed almost alive when touched. At night, the explorers claimed the forest itself began to whisper, not just in one language, but in many: French, Portuguese, Latin, and even tongues no one could identify. The voices grew louder, circling the camp until the men could hardly sleep. One journal, later recovered, described a night when the explorers heard the cries of a woman in the distance. When they followed the sound, they discovered nothing but an open clearing, perfectly circular, where not a single blade of grass grew. The cries stopped the moment they stepped inside. In the silence that followed, one of them wrote, "It felt as though the earth itself was breathing beneath our feet." Terrified, the expedition abandoned the site by dawn, but the memory of what they had seen, the emptiness, the shadows, the voices, followed them forever. Some never spoke of it again. Others went mad. And so the mystery only deepened. A thriving colony, hundreds strong, had simply ceased to exist. Not killed, not buried, not fled, just gone. As if the forest had opened its mouth and
cursed the ground. Word of the vanished colony spread quickly, but what terrified outsiders most was not the disappearance itself. It was the warnings that followed. Local tribes who had lived in the Amazon for generations refused to even utter the colony's name. To them, it was not simply abandoned land, it was cursed. They told stories of a doorway, a rift between worlds, hidden deep within that patch of forest, a gate that was never meant for human eyes. They believed that when the settlers built their homes there, they had unknowingly placed themselves on sacred, forbidden soil, and the earth had claimed them back. Generations of explorers tried to test the legend. Some returned, pale and broken, speaking of nightmares that bled into waking life. Others were never seen again. Even in modern times, the curse remained. Satellite images show something strange, a dark circular patch of forest where no village or camp has ever survived. Attempts to build roads, bases, even logging camps there always ended in disaster. Workers vanished in the night. Machinery broke down inexplicably, as if the very ground refused to be tamed.
Those who stayed too long reported the same thing the settlers once feared: the whispers. Voices in languages they did not know, calling to them from the trees, just beyond the light. One government survey team reported that their compasses spun wildly when they entered the area, as though north itself had been erased. Another team swore they heard the sound of hundreds of footsteps moving in unison behind them, though when they turned, there was nothing but endless vines and shadows. And yet, the deeper the scientists dug, the less sense it made. Soil samples showed nothing unusual. No chemicals, no toxins, no signs of disease. To science, it was just another patch of jungle. But to those who dared step inside, it was something else entirely. The tribes still say the land is alive. They warn that the jungle is not just a backdrop, but a predator, a patient hunter that waits, lures, and consumes. And the patch where the colony once stood is its mouth. The question is not why the settlers vanished, but whether the jungle will ever open its gate again.
Centuries have passed since that colony was lost, but the jungle has never given up its secret. No bones, no graves, no proof of what happened to those hundreds of souls. Only silence and whispers carried on the wind. And that silence raises a question darker than death itself. Did the jungle consume them? Did the vines and shadows swallow their bodies whole, feeding on them until not a trace remained? Or did they walk willingly into something else? A doorway hidden in the green, a gate between worlds, luring them with voices of loved ones, pulling them into a place where no human was meant to go. Because if such a doorway truly exists, then it didn't just take the settlers. It's still there, waiting for the next curious explorer, waiting for the next ambitious company, waiting, maybe, for someone like you. So, if one day you find yourself deep in the Amazon and the jungle suddenly grows quiet, no birds, no insects, only silence, remember the lost colony, remember the whispers, and ask yourself this one final, terrifying question. Would you dare step through the forest gate?